on the go, then we ask them to raise a hand. But Henry knows all this. We've done many coffee mornings, and yeah, it's a wide and varied bunch, Michael. That's all I can say.
And just for my benefits, obviously it's members of the playpen that get to see it, and it's under Chatham House rules. Is that right? I think that's
basically yes. Basically
yeah.
yes. Yeah.
Sure. That's fine.
You better say it's under Chatham House rules, Steve, if you want to.
Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah. Okay. That's fine.
I mean, I don't think I'm going to be saying anything too provocative, but I mean, it's kind of helpful. I think.
Yeah. Well, also, I know Padraig Floyd's attending today, and he used to be editor of Pensions Management magazine, and he's now freelance.
Yeah,
but,
I normally run a blog which says what people say.
Yeah.
But I don't have to attribute it. The trouble is,
anything you say,
it's pretty hard to work out who I attribute it to if it's not you, Michael.
No, I know.
Blame Andre. Blame Andre.
I think it's fine.
Everyone else does.
I think it's fine. I mean, maybe I'll only, it'd be helpful to see what goes on there, just in case. I mean, most of it is for, public consumption, as in, I'm not going to say anything different than perhaps I didn't say under the webinar previously. Obviously, on some of the Q&As, we'll see where we get to, because I suppose it's a slight difference for me, given that I'm, hopefully know a fair bit, but I don't know absolutely everything. So if it wasn't Chatham House and there's going to be stuff attributed, I might think a bit more carefully.
Well, it's a question whether you want it. Are you happy to have the recording distributed? That's much more pertinent, because that will show you saying things in real time.
Yeah, it's a good point. Well, we can let's decide.
Well, we can make the recording, and then we can decide at the end. Give Michael the choice and say, "Ooh," or not, as the case may be.
No, we just put it in the locker and say,
I'm just going to
holding this against you.
I'm going to mute Henry, so I'm going to pass over to you, Henry, and then if Andre want to start bringing people in, I'll be back in about 5 minutes. So, cheers, Michael.
So are you happy for me to bring people in then?
Yes, please.
Well, 10:30.
Yeah. What about you, Michael? Are you okay? Yeah.
We can ask people to mute Andre as well.
Yep. Okay. All right. Let's begin. Good morning, everyone. If I could ask you to mute, that'd be very helpful. Thank you.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
You can take yourself off mute and say hi. Morning, Ian. I'm just looking to see who we got on the call. Gareth.
Morning.
Morning. Okay, Steve is temporarily indisposed. I will therefore be the master of ceremonies as well as the Grand Inquisitor. Not that that's what I intend to be. Very pleased today to be able to discuss the Consumer Duty with somebody who was one of its architects, Michael Lawrence, to the FCA. And I hope that this session will allow us to understand more about what the FCA want from it, and also to understand more about our obligations around it. Whether we are FCA regulated or not, we all have a consumer duty, as I was reminded by the Pensions Minister only last month, who said, you may not think that that's part of your job, but I'm telling you it's part of your consumer duty, which was nice. Yeah, and probably pleased everybody in the room. I was pleased to say the FCA were in the room at the time. Okay, so without more ado, a couple of housekeeping things. We are recording. If you don't want it to be recorded, put your hand up. Okay, and I'm now going to ask Michael to introduce himself and explain a little bit about how he came to be what he is and what he does. So over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Henry. Good to see you all on here today. Perhaps I've met some of you before, or you've seen me speaking. So I'm Michael Lawrence. I'm a technical specialist working in consumer investment supervision, and have been doing so in a couple of weeks. It will be 16 years. So man and boy, almost. And most of my work in that time has been doing the big thematic reviews in the pension and investment space. So for those of you with long memories, I think we started doing stuff around pension switching way back in 2009, supervising the retail distribution review, risk profiling, lump sum shopping of banks mystery, lump sum shopping of banks investment advice, and a whole host of other bits and pieces. What to say? I think you slightly oversold me, Henry, in terms of being the architect of the consumer duty. I mean, I'm definitely a consumer duty fan. I've been working quite closely with the policy team putting it in to place. And I suppose a lot of my work before the consumer duty came in was around the area of product governance. So yes, you can look at what firms are doing in terms of advice or non-advised sales or complaint handling, but a lot of it comes back to the underlying kind of fundamental design of products and services, and then how they're managed ongoing. So I've written lots of thematic reports that talk to our expectations, which initially were under an obscure bit of guidance called the RPPD, or the responsibilities of product providers and distributors of the fair treatment of customers. It was then reinforced when MiFID II and the Insurance Distribution Directive came in 2018, when we got PROD, the kind of product governance source book, and now kind of the new consumer duty builds upon that. So what I thought, I'm quite keen for a good discussion today. I would do my best to answer your questions as best I'm able. Some I might not, but we can take those away. But I thought what I'd do first off is to just give a kind of quick summary about the duty and how it applies in the consumer investment space, talk a little bit about the kind of core kind of outcomes that are a key part of the duty, as I think they provide a kind of really good lens for kind of getting into the kind of guts of the issues. And then perhaps after that, we can have a chat about it, and we can kind of go from there, if that's okay with anyone. Before I jump off, anyone want to disagree with any of that, or ask some questions? No? Good. So, I mean, let's start off, why I'm here, having seen a lot of kind of regulation come in, retail distribution review, MiFID, what's clear to me is that, really healthy, constructive dialogue between us, the regulator, and the kind of regulated community is kind of crucial. A lot of the time, we're not trying to catch anyone out. We're trying to have a kind of grown-up conversation to say, look, this is what we're doing. Here's what we think it means for you, and hopefully we're giving you what you need then to work out how to, apply that in ways that are kind of, complementary to kind of running your businesses. So it's really good to come out and speak to people. And I suppose the good thing about the duty is that it applies across the kind of panoply of firms that are kind of participating in the consumer investment sector, whether that's as product providers, distributors, whether advised, non-advised, or, vertically integrated firms that happen to do, various parts of what are often quite complex kind of value chains. I suppose for us, sometimes we've seen firms become kind of focused very much on kind of technical compliance with specific rules, which obviously is very important. We don't have rules unless we think they're important. But I suppose the point about the duty is, to the extent that you're not doing that already, and let's be clear, many firms are, to kind of, look beyond the detailed technical compliance to the kind of end quality of the consumer outcomes that have been delivered. Hopefully they come hand in hand. Sometimes you'd be surprised, you see firms very focused on a particular bit without maybe looking at the bigger picture, and that's obviously something that we're kind of keen for firms to do. I suppose, as I said before, the duty is a really helpful piece of regulation in that it kind of permeates all stages of the consumer journey, cradle to grave. So the kind of life cycle of products and services being designed, being kind of implemented, being monitored, and then the kind of, the consumers who buy those products and services, being serviced throughout the lifetime of it. I suppose one thing to say is that it doesn't exist in a vacuum. I mean, it kind of underpins our kind of broader consumer investment strategy. So, that, firms are designing products and services which help consumers meet their kind of key needs, that they can invest with confidence, and they understand the regulatory protections provided, that people end up with products and services that are right for their needs and at a price that represents value for money. Obviously, value is one big element of the duty that's quite new. obviously in this space that firms help protect consumers from pension and investment scams. There's a kind of litany of issues where, which is still, flowing through into FSCS levy payments now, which we have had a particular focus on as part of our consumer investment strategy. So this is a key area for us. And obviously the other corollary to that is, where consumers end up in higher risk investments, that's only where it's kind of appropriate for them, their circumstances, their risk profile. And then finally, having done all of that stuff, that kind of firms deliver on their ongoing service commitments, and that they kind of monitor whether the products and services that they've spent a lot of time and effort, bringing to market are kind of performing as expected. So as I said, I thought I'd talk about this in a brief detail through the lens of the 4 consumer duty outcomes. So obviously you've got the high level principle, you've got kind of cross-cutting rules, and then the kind of outcomes. But I think because the outcomes talk to those kind of key customer firm interfaces, they're always for me quite a helpful and kind of orderly way to do it. So the first is the kind of products and services outcome. And this is about design, and it's about firms making sure that when they are coming up with new products and services, and obviously reviewing their existing ones, that they make sure they meet kind of genuine consumer needs. And this isn't new in the sense, as I mentioned earlier, this builds upon our kind of existing product governance requirements, and particularly the kind of rules that came in from MiFID and the IDD back in 2018. I suppose one bit that is new is that there's a deliberate focus within the duty on the design of both products and services. So, if you're a firm providing guidance, solution, advice, or discretionary investment management, you need to think about the duty in terms of how those services are designed and delivered. So who's your target market? How do the key features of them, what they include, what they don't include, I suppose, the range of investments, the price you charge, the ongoing information or service you provide, how are they fitted back to the needs of a kind of clearly identified target market? And perhaps just as importantly, making sure that you identify customers for whom your service and product are not appropriate, and that's absolutely fine, and if you've got that, I mean, it's often called a kind of negative target market, thinking about how you can kind of identify that, and we maybe can come on to a couple of examples about that. I suppose in the pension space, there's lots of non-advised solutions that kind of permeate the market. And obviously the point here is around firms, trying to make sure that they can help consumers achieve good outcomes. Obviously key to that is knowing the kind of information needs of your potential clients, and then ensuring that the kind of structure and the kind of content of the supportive information and the kind of customer journey design and architecture are kind of working well together to help consumers make kind of effective, informed investment decisions. And obviously that's not just at the point of sale, but ongoing. Obviously for financial advisor firms, it's around the design of their initial and ongoing advisory services, and how that works for different groups of consumers. I mean, that's not to say you always need to serve different groups. Some firms might have a very specific and constrained target market, but to the extent that you're seeing people with different needs, I suppose accumulation versus decumulation is a good example. Different levels of complexity, holistic financial planning versus investing for little Jenny or Johnny's university education in a junior high. So that's quite different. How are you kind of calibrating what you offer to work for those different consumers? And obviously, in the kind of pensions and investment space, a key bit of design is obviously the underlying investment solution. Obviously, there's a whole range of things that are available out there, but obviously we very much hope that firms make sure that they're kind of compatible with the needs and objectives of the target market. Obviously that can differ whether it's an advised or a non-advised service. The next thing is about price and value. So this is kind of substantively new. We've already got some rules about kind of fair treatment. I think there's some guidance about excessive charges and the risks of self-defeating transactions. Some of you may have heard that. We've certainly written about it in the past. But I think that the price and value outcome in the duty goes beyond this. I mean, very simply, it's about ensuring the kind of cost and services that your consumers pay are kind of reasonable compared to the benefits they receive. I think in a good way, often in many parts of the market, we give firms quite a lot of flexibility in how they set their charges, because you're the experts. You know how you want it to work. But obviously, it's important for firms to think carefully about how those models and whether and how those models deliver fair value for all of the groups of consumers that end up using them. And I think that's not just about the theory of it, although that's important, obviously, in the design stage, but then how consumers are actually likely to use those products and services in practice. And for any of you that attended, or not attended, virtually attended the webinar that we did on this a few weeks ago, one of my colleagues talked a bit about a kind of hypothetical investment platform, targeted at people with big investment amounts, and having like fixed charges, and how, if we saw that there are a number of consumers with small investment amounts, where those fixed charges would obviously be a commensurately larger proportion of their investment amount, that there could be a kind of harm there. And so obviously it's about firms to think about what works well for their customers, and obviously we know that firms do that already in a number of places. In the advisor charging model space, lots of firms have some fixed charges, they have caps, they have tiered charges, and so on and so forth. But I think it's about firms thinking about what works well for their consumers. And I suppose the point then is, thinking about how that works in practice. And if you identify that, you've got a particular cohort of consumers who, I don't know, you thought would make use of a service but aren't, or are not within your ideal target market, that example earlier of the people with much lower investment amounts, working out what that means. And then I suppose if there is a fundamental issue, foreseeable harm there, taking action to fix it. Customer understanding.
Michael, can I ask a question just about charges?
Because questions at any point.
Well, the point I make is that actually, if people know what the charges are, they will generally not buy a high charge product, and generally buy a lower charge product. But if they don't know what the charges are, they will quite often buy a high charge product thinking it's a low charge product. And the consumer harm tends to be in the lack of transparency about the pricing more than the pricing itself. If I was to fully price a product and say, this is what it actually costs, this is our margin, and it was very expensive, and no one would buy it. That's just the point I make.
Yeah, I think that's true in kind of some areas. Obviously, transparency is a kind of key part of this. It's a kind of key way for firms to put, and I'm about to come on to it, but to put consumers in a position to make an informed investment decision. And obviously, price is key. But I mean, I suppose the thing I would say, having been involved in lots of supervision work in the space over the years, is that often that transparency isn't always there, and just because the pension investment market is really complex, and that's not just at the kind of outset, and we know, if you're getting advice, you've got there are rules around what firms need to give to the customer, both up front and ongoing, and so hopefully that's there, and obviously an end distributor needs to, within those kind of disclosure obligations, account for the the totality of all the charges, set them out, set out what they are, and also show the output in terms of what it means for the consumer's investment returns. But I certainly think that some consumers, and we've done lots of research to show this, they need more help. They need those charges to be set out in a way that they can make a meaningful decision. And sometimes you see stuff where maybe all the information's there, maybe it's set out somewhere within a suitability report, but it's not brought together in a way that consumers can make the best decision. And so I think it's about transparency, but also then presentation as well, and hopefully some testing, just to make sure that what you think consumers have taken away from it is true in practice. So yeah, definitely agree with you there. I mean, I won't rattle on for too much longer, so I'm going to give lots of time for kind of chat. But obviously, I talked about customer understanding. Obviously, we've got clear, fair, not misleading in place already, but the duty does go beyond this, and it's about not just doing that stuff, but making sure the content of it is sufficient to give customers the right information at the right time to make informed investment decisions. And I suppose that could also flow back through to kind of product design as well. So perhaps there are some products that you just don't want to put into the hands of some customers without advice, for example, or where you think actually this is a complex decision, we need to up the level of supportive guidance we need. And I certainly remember when we were doing some work, gosh, when was it? A while back, on innovative new non-advised distribution models, and we paid for some consumer research. It's out there. A very sad story about someone that invested in a really good product that their grandfather had told them about, but unfortunately they didn't realize that if they put this was a 20-year-old person, that if they put their money into a SIP they weren't going to have access to it. So they were 55. That had escaped the customer's attention. Now obviously it's a bit of a kind of a slightly apocryphal tale there, and an extreme example, but I suppose the key thing is, don't assume too much. Make sure you think about what your consumers information needs are, and try and make sure you're helping them make good decisions. Obviously in the pension space, this is a live issue, isn't it? We've had investment pathways, we've got ongoing discussions about the advice guidance boundary, about how firms can help consumers make that. And I think we're clear that firms have got a really powerful role here. There's certainly particular points in the consumer journey for pensions where consumers are receptive to engagement and maybe kind of primed to make decisions. So we're hopeful that firms can use that to their example. And lots of firms are doing really innovative stuff here. And I suppose the point is we just want to make sure that it kind of permeates the wider industry. And then finally, and then I will be quiet and answer some questions, it's about customer support. So, having helped people get the thing that you've designed and are selling to them, then thinking about what support those consumers need throughout the kind of life cycle of that product or service. So if you've committed to doing something, that you deliver on it, that the delivery of it is good. So, ongoing advisory services is a good example there. If consumers make requests for support, that you respond appropriately. If you see stuff in terms of ongoing decisions where you think, gosh, this could be an issue. Cost of living is a good current example of where people might be tempted to access medium to long-term products ahead of the period that they originally envisaged. How can you support those customers to make sure that they make an informed decision? It might be a painful decision, but they might not have any choice. And so that's a key example of ongoing stuff changes and thinking about those changing needs. Obviously scams is a key one. Firms following their obligations there to stop people transferring to fraudulent stuff, when there's lots of good work already in that space. Complaint handling, and obviously if consumers do want to move elsewhere, and you've done whatever due diligence you need to do on those transfer requests, that those are kind of handled without undue delay, and all of the market working with each other to kind of facilitate that. So that was all I was going to say. A quick canter, relatively quick, through the main outcomes. More than happy now to have a bit of a chat. And obviously, I'll give my view, but obviously others might have views too. So it's really keen for a good discussion if we can.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. And please, anyone who wants to have a chat, just butt in or put your hand up. Probably best to put your hand up. I'm looking at the list now. My first question was, it's been 8 days now since the end of this sort of first stage of the implementation process. Everyone who was an FCA registered organisation had to deliver some kind of implementation plan, I'm led to believe. How's that gone? Have you got any sense of whether or not people found that easy, whether they did it at all, whether there's max non-compliance? Is there any sort of feedback coming through to the FCA about how stage one has gone?
Yeah, sure. So I think in that space, obviously the point of the implementation deadline was for firms to have a plan to be in a good position come July. We are, looking at how firms are kind of responding to that. But I mean, we're not trying to catch anyone out here. The deadline is July for doing it. Obviously, for new products and services, closed books have a bit longer. And so, we're having conversations with firms. I think there are plans to kind of reach out and see what the broader populace is doing. And I suppose the point of that is to work out where there are kind of issues, the same way as coming to these kind of sessions here, and work out how we can be supportive so that firms are in a good position to know what our expectations are and kind of can meet them. I think we mentioned in the policy statement that there's plans to kind of write out to specific parts of the market with a bit more detail. I mean, I've tried to give you some clue into that here, and it's not anything secret on what that means in practice, and those communications I think are planned towards the end of this kind of calendar year, so there's more details to come. But I think at the point that we have any substantive evidence of the good, bad, or indifferent of implementation, we'll let firms know. If we can see things that are working well, less well, we don't want to hide that. But I don't think the point of that is to kind of catch people out. It's like, this needs to be taken seriously, and I think that's the key thing. I mean, you occasionally hear a narrative of, I'm already, doing my TCF, treating customers fairly, I don't really need to do anything here. And I think the point is, I don't think that's true. I mean, that's not to say that if you're already fully TCFing away, if you allow me to use it as a horrible verb, that you might not be in a good position for the duty. But the duty does go beyond, what we currently expect of firms in a couple of areas. So we are hoping that firms do that kind of gap analysis and then work out what they need to do by July and thereafter. So a bit of a long-winded answer to say there's nothing I can tell you now, but the plan is to keep up the communications ongoing so that we have a really kind of open dialogue, and to the extent that we can see some things that we like and dislike, we can put those out there.
I love it when a regulator says we're doing this in a toothless fashion. you know there's always a barbed tooth at the back. But
well, I mean, I don't want to take kind of opposition to that comment. I suppose
I didn't mean to wind down.
No. But I mean, the point is that there'll be a time when when we will wish to make sure that firms are kind of living up to it. I think kind of implementation is, we appreciate that we're only so many months on from when the policy statement was done. It's a challenging deadline for firms. That's why we listened when we did the policy statement and gave us slightly longer for the kind of closed book services. So we want to be supportive of it, and at the point that our teeth need to be bared, I'm sure we will think carefully on whether and how to do that, but it's not currently.
Okay, Ian, I know you've had your hand up. Do you want to take over?
Yeah. Thanks for your presentation, Michael, and all strength to you in what you're trying to achieve with consumer duty. I also really like the verb TCFing, and would like to use that in future. Whilst I, as I say, I really applaud the work in the direction of travel and that kind of walking in the person's shoes idea. You see things sometimes, like Henry, I'm fairly active on Twitter. And a few months ago, I saw an ex-Liverpool footballer tweeting about a cryptocurrency that was the only one that was guaranteed not to go down in value. And I tagged it with the FCA straight away. I'd be interested in your thoughts. Well, there's all these people on this call, I think, to a man and woman, strive to do a great job for the member and the customer. But we seem to have people just driving horse and cars, causing financial harm. And what can we do about it? What can we do about it? Because it just seems to be like one rule for the decent people trying to do a good job, and then an entirely, free hand for people promoting products, misrepresenting products.
So
and I think the whole industry is harmed as a consequence, really.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, I suppose there's a question about whether they're part of the established industry or not, which is what it's slightly pro-con. I mean, but the area that you're pointing to there, which is consumers having access to kind of high risk investments, which are likely to be beyond their kind of risk tolerance, is something that is a kind of key issue for us. It's a key part of our existing consumer investment strategy, which has been in place for a couple of years now, and there's already substantive work in that space separate to the duty targeting it. So we've got a whole area that is not adequately, actively scanning the market, looking for people advertising products, making sure that they're adhering to the rules we have in place around financial promotions, not straying over the regulatory perimeter, and where we do, taking action with that. As part of it, we've published earlier this year a policy statement, I think it's PS 22 no, that's 2025. I have to remember, I think 2210. Anyway, it was on our higher risk investment rule changes, whereby we are trying to undertake a number of actions to stop those wrong kind of investments ending up in the hands of consumers. So, you know, categorizing investments very clearly, adding in additional checks and balances that prevent people from buying things which shouldn't be in the hands of kind of mass market investors, and so on and so forth in that space. Obviously, key to that is us also then working with the kind of wider community, and obviously the government's online harms bill, which I don't know the latest statement of. It was also looking at this from the perspective of the obligations on the other parties in the chain, such as the search engines and whatnot, so that we can bring all those elements together. Because you know our regulatory kind of perimeter spans so far, and obviously we're actively looking for firms that stray beyond it. But obviously it's not just us that are involved in the solution. So I very much agree with you. Certainly key to us is that for the authorized firms, when they're offering customers higher risk investments, they think really carefully about whether that's right for the target market. And I think our view is that for most retail customers that's unlikely to be the case. And often, we don't see firms, the majority of firms playing in this space. But agree with you on the kind of negative impact of firms at the periphery of that, particularly where consumers obviously don't often understand, what is authorized and what's not, and what that means, and the kind of negative impact of that. I mean, just one final thing: we've had lots of also, there's many ways to skin a cat. Consumer campaigns in this space. We had a big Scam Smart campaign running. We've now got Invest Smart running, and that's not just looking at the kind of high risk investments that you mentioned earlier, but also ways of trading in more mainstream investments that are quite risky. So people day trading in single equities, that's not going to be right for the majority of customers, and it can lead to losing lots of your money as well. So we're trying to come at it from multiple issues, and obviously the other thing, just as a impassioned plea to yourselves, if you do see stuff which you do not like and have concerns about, please do tell us. There's a form on our website where you can make that known. You can obviously do it discreetly if it's whistleblowing, but we want the regulated community to also be additional eyes and ears. So please do tell us.
Okay,
I mean, sorry, Henry.
I think one of the things that really kind of gets us a little bit concerned is this regulatory perimeter thing, because taking Ian's example, I mean, there are clearly bits of what's going on which would be going on outside the regulatory perimeter. I doubt the Liverpool footballer himself, whatever, was regulated, but there's a platform there which is promoting him, this, whether it's Google or whatever. There is clearly a product sat there behind there. So what bits of the chain are being caught by the consumer duty and what bits are being missed? That's the kind of question which I think a lot of people would like to know. Is the consumer duty going to catch out those kind of issues?
So I think to the extent that you've got kind of authorized firms dealing directly or kind of once removed from retail consumers, then it might. So for example, Section 21 promoters. So these are firms that approve the financial promotions for unauthorized firms. You could have some platforms offering consumers the ability to kind of purchase these investments either with or without advice. So where that's the case, obviously it bites. We've got lots of existing rules, so I'd say the duty is complementing what we have, but I suppose it's also saying some other things as well, around, if you are going to sell these high risk products, think really, really clearly and carefully about the type of retail consumers for whom they are appropriate, and then just as importantly, think about who they're not appropriate for, and try and take steps in how you're designing and then running whatever products and services that you come up with to kind of take that into account. So I think it bites where it bites, and then in the areas that are kind of over the perimeter, we're continuing to do our kind of broader kind of work and interventions to kind of scour that. But there is a kind of limitation there, obviously.
Can I just
Ian,
just
do you want
ask,
to come on and then
yeah,
come to Tom? Yeah.
yeah, just Michael, where exactly should I have reported that tweet? If you can just let us know,
Yeah,
because I do see things, so I would like to, get it to the right place as quick as possible. All I did was tag the FCA in it and put WTF, I think, or something similarly eloquent. But
yeah, I'll put the link in. I'll put the link in the chat, or I'll send it around afterwards. I won't try and multitask. I want to give you my undivided attention, but there is a place to do that. And obviously, as I said, if it's any awkwardness in terms of the need to kind of do it discreetly, then there's the whistleblowing process as well.
okay, thank you.
Tom.
Thanks, Henry. Hi, Michael. My apologies, I missed the first 15 minutes of this call. So, first of all, I apologise for that, and also if you've actually already covered this question, again, a further apology will be necessary. Obviously, we're all enormously excited about Consumer Duty and the good that it will bring. I was really interested to see the FCA announcing an holistic review of the advice guidance boundary. So I guess I've got two questions around that, because clearly this overlaps quite heavily with where we go with Consumer Duty. First of all, what even is an holistic review? This seemed to be new language for the FCA. And can you give us any sense of the time frame of that?
Sure. Yeah. So obviously, this is acknowledging the fact that in our conversations with firms, there's a clear identification that some customers aren't getting the right support that they need. We've said as much as part of the financial advice market review, and we also signal it as part of our consumer investment strategy. Obviously, we want a market that works well, diverse range of channels, helping customers that hopefully they can choose between. And we know from speaking to the market that in some areas, firms want to be helpful, and indeed they feel that the duty is compelling them to be more helpful, and they've got a concern about how helpful they can be. I'm trying not to use the word helpful again, although I quite like it, before they get up to the boundary. And I think this isn't saying that every D2C provider suddenly needs to start providing advice. I think this is about firms thinking about what their customers' needs are and working out how to help them. I think what we've seen in the past in some of our supervision work is, if the boundaries say here, firms have got so far, and perhaps they've decided actually we're going to stop here, and obviously what that gap is something that the consumer needs to navigate. And obviously we accept that firms have obviously very keen to ensure that they don't stray beyond their regulatory permissions, that they don't incur liabilities that they hadn't planned for, so on and so forth. But at the same time, we also want firms to support their consumers kind of appropriately. So I suppose there's a few things here. I mean, in the first instance, our door is open to have constructive conversations with firms now about what they can do within the current framework, whether that's in terms of more personalized guidance. It's certainly possible. It doesn't mean it's advice. And also, if firms do want to give advice, giving small bits of advice within the existing kind of regulatory framework. Again, that's possible. Advice doesn't always need to be holistic. We'll come back to your word about holistic in a second, Tom. I'm not going to avoid it. And our door is open. We're having lots of constructive discussions with various trade bodies about that. We've got our innovation pathways area, which is something that firms can apply to and say, look, we want to do this. We're worried about whether we meet the or aspects of the regulatory framework. Can you give us some support on that? And we will do that, assuming you meet the kind of criteria, which, supplying, advice and guidance to consumers that need it, is a key one. So there's that. I think there's a recognition, though, that where the boundary sits currently, it does have kind of consequences, and so I think the point of the advice guidance boundary review is to kind of explore that in more detail. Obviously, as part of the work coming out of the Financial Services Bill, we're taking control of lots of previously EU created kind of legislation. We will get that, and then we've obviously got choices about what we do with that. And I suppose the advice guidance boundary kind of piece of work is us putting ourselves in a good position to work out where we want to go at the point that we get the powers to do it. So there's no prejudged outcome other than that we want the market to work well, and to the extent that we see issues that don't work well, then we're going to need to think about what we might do with it. In terms of timing, I don't have any further info on that at the moment. Obviously we know that firms are really keen on that. I can take that away and see if there's anything more, but obviously with lots of stuff going on, it's not just about us, it's about when the bill makes its way through Parliament and so on and so forth, and how we equip ourselves to do all the bits of it, because it's not just retail. Obviously there's lots of kind of wholesale stuff in there as well that's coming across from Europe, so I don't have any more information for you on that. But in terms of the word holistic, I think it's just meant to be kind of, it's all encompassing. We're not going to start with a kind of constrained focus that kind of excludes things. We're really keen to look at all the kind of moving parts in this, and then use that kind of holistic view to work out where we go from here. I mean, the thing I would say, just from having been involved in this space before, so I was part of the financial advice market review team working with the Treasury, is that obviously it's complicated. I mean, that's quite obvious, but never a harm saying it. Some of it is our rules, some of it is set in legislation. The regulated activities order sets out what constitutes advice, and so to the extent that we do want to make any changes, there are going to be bits of work that need to take place to do that. We need to consult on it. So I suppose my point is, as good as that the outcomes of that review will be at the point that they come up with it, I hope it doesn't put firms off doing what they can do now. And if firms, as I said, do want to take a kind of progressive view so that they help meet consumers under the duty, just bringing it back to the conversation this morning, and they feel kind of unclear or concerned about doing it, then please do consider the kind of offers of support that we have, so that we can help you kind of navigate that better.
Eugene, you've got a question. Eugene, are you on mute?
Sorry, Michael, Eugene Nagu here from N2 Asset Management. I have two questions actually. Do we have an outcome that we want to reach by consumer duty? For example, the FCA has determined a few months ago that the cost of friction for investors is around 1.9 per annum. Do we have something that we're targeting to reduce this by 10 bips or 25 bips or something like this? Is there something that we can actually see at the end that we can say, yes, we've been successful or we weren't successful in doing this?
Mm-hmm.
And second, you probably know there are still firms there which have made out of transaction costs a bit of a joke, have published negative transaction costs, and they have a way to argue why the negative transaction costs came in, but I think this is just a way to look at the regulation in especially for mainly they appear for corporate bonds funds, and when actually transaction costs are very high. So the corporation.
Do you want to comment specifically on that area of transparency?
Yeah, I'll start by saying I'm not an asset management expert, so I'll probably have to speak more in kind of generalities. But I think the principles are clear, because I think the same question probably has been levied in the areas that I'm more comfortable with. Is there a magic number on consumer duty? I think the answer, quite simply, is that there isn't. What we want is for firms, when they're looking at the issue of value, to think about what they're doing, to think about what they're kind of creating, the service that they're creating or the product relative to the costs, and thinking about whether that relationship is reasonable across the different groups of consumers that are making use of it. Now, you know, some firms might already be there. They are, you know, they've cut out any extraneous cost, you know, and so on and so forth. And it might be that they've got less to do. You know, some firms will be in the opposite position and they might have more to do. So I don't think it's easy saying if every firm trims X off their prices, then they're meeting the duty. I think what we want is people just to think about it, through the lens of the different types of customer that they are servicing, and then to work out whether they need to take action or not. But what I will say is, you know, the consumer duty is like a starting place for a kind of dialogue with the market. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, there are plans to communicate with each area upcoming. So Eugen, you know, you will see something from my colleagues in asset management giving a bit more, you know, meat on the bone of what this means in that space. And then I suppose ongoing, as we, you know, supervise this, we do new thematic reviews, you know, we will look to produce, you know, further good and poor practice guidance, potentially, you know, setting out what this means. But yeah, so that's where we are. No specific numbers at the moment.
Can I pick up on what Eugene said and ask the question the other way around? Because there is a price comparison website on the MAPS service, the Money Helper service, which currently asks us to compare investment pathways as non-advised people. Yeah, and the only comparator which we're asked to use is price. And you know, I've questioned MAPS about whether this is likely to change. They say only when we get a further pronouncement on value for money. Now, I mean, we've been going around this loop now for years and years and years. Yeah. And meanwhile, the consumers are still being asked to buy what are effectively investment products purely on price. Is there a way that we can short circuit this laborious process? And I put this back to you. Isn't it part of your consumer duty to make sure that people who are buying on a non-advised basis get a proper basis for buying?
So I kind of agree with you that price is only one component here. You know,
You
it's
say
an important...
that, but
yeah, I'm not au fait with the detail of that price comparison process that you mentioned. So I can't go into the detail of that. I mean, but from the broader principle, obviously, you know, we want markets that work well. We want there to be, you know, transparency of fees versus content. I mean, that's the key point here. You know, take a market like insurance. You know, there's obviously a race to the bottom in terms of price on, you know, and that just ends up hollowing out policies, which might be right for some people, but you know, when they come to claim and they find out that, you know, the things that they thought were included aren't, then, you know, so we're not saying, you know, cheapest is best. What we're saying is that the price that you charge relative to what you give consumers needs to have a kind of reasonable, you know, relationship between the two. You know, and a number of firms are doing this already. They're thinking about it keenly. They have like tiering in place, but you also see some firms, I think we highlighted this in our work on DB pension transfers, where you had like uncapped initial charges going in, and you know, one customer would have £100,000, another customer would have like £500,000, and the price it ended up paying was like very, very different. And there's a question then about whether the firm has a justifiable case for one customer paying 5 times as much. And I suppose, you know, notional redress liabilities and PI is one angle in there, but it's not the only factor. I mean, on your point there, I mean, I think we, you know, as a regulator, we need to be honest that, you know, in terms of markets working well from a competition standpoint, some are better than others. You know, in the kind of investment space, there are some mechanisms for people to compare costs and charges, but there are also some well-known and established features of the market that, you know, lead us to think that, you know, it could be better. So the fact that most people pick an advisor based upon a recommendation from a friend or family, they don't shop around, they stick with that advisor through thick and thin, and so on and so forth. So I suppose, without answering your question directly, because I can't, I suppose the point is price is important, but value is a composite of the price versus the quality of what you're getting. And so hopefully firms will be taking that approach when they come to consider that for themselves.
We just hope that the government's own website will follow suit. Okay, Eugene, you still got your hand up. Is that because you've got a question, or was that just because you've got the
No, I
hand
would
up?
like to say that this value, consumers are poor. They cannot measure value of a financial product very, very well. And I can even say that the firm itself now is in this consumer duty is asked to measure itself. It's not easy. We all have our own behavior. We all want to protect ourselves. We will not come any firm to recognize that we are doing things wrong, do we?
No, I think that's true. I mean, we
So
know
in case there are no benchmarks, there are no numbers, there is nothing, it's very hard actually to implement something like customer duty.
True. I suppose we have seen some firms, approach this well, using kind of benchmarks, market analysis to kind of make those kind of determinations. And obviously, we've said that in terms of firms doing value assessments and then, sharing those with their distributors, we want that to work well. And if we find that information isn't passing between the parties as we would want, then please do let us know, and we can kind of, look to see what we can do to facilitate that. I suppose, I would agree with you that many consumers can struggle to make determinations from the vast range of products, which is why so many of them make use of skilled intermediaries to help them do that, whether that's in the non-advised space and firms curating their lists of selected investments and so on and so forth, but then also in the advised space where you've got someone making that determination for you under a kind of suitability assessment as well. But obviously, hopefully those firms have a keen eye on value too, both in terms of the products and services that they're recommending, and also I suppose as the end distributor in the chain, taking account of the totality of the charges, the total costs of the solution.
Yeah.
Put my teeth in, and thinking about that. But I agree. I mean, this is a new and it's an interesting area. I imagine as we move forward in the next few years, there will be, further content from us, from trade and industry bodies to help firms in this space.
We've seen 7 years now of IGC reports. And in those 7 years, we've only seen one IGC once actually say that their provider was not offering value for money. And that's to Eugene's point. It is very hard to actually turn around on yourself and say, well, I don't think we're doing a very good job, other than actually walking away from the whole thing. What are you supposed to do? You're supposed to put yourself on notice, put yourself on a naughty step. It's very difficult. So we are looking for you to understand what good looks like. And the question of benchmarking really becomes, I found it doing my own survey of our own firm, but I found it quite hard to work out whether or not I was conforming to the consumer duty in certain areas, because I just didn't have enough of an idea of what good looked like. But there are questions coming thick and fast. So I'll go to Gareth.
Thanks,
Gareth,
Henry. Yeah, kind of a broad question, really. I mean, is the consumer duty an absolute 100% always the same, or could you do more? And if you could do more, but it would cost more, is there a kind of a balance involved here, or is it always the duty is the duty and it is fixed?
You might need to put a bit of flesh on the bones of that. So you're talking about, when you say you're not talking about us, you're talking about as a firm. Yes, as a firm, if your duty is absolutely fixed and that's what you have to do and you should do no more and no less, or is it such where you could do more but because it would cost more you choose not to, if you like? A very sort of fuzzy question, I'm afraid. No, it's okay. I mean, I suppose there are certain things that firms, we want them to do, but then certain things are going to be kind of judgments that we want firms to make. And I suppose I get the sense of what you're saying there is, I'm a firm, maybe I could offer 3 tiers of service for customers at different price points with different features, and I suppose that's fine. But I suppose what we're saying under the duty is, please think about the needs of your customer. Please, match them to the right thing, and then within the thing, make sure the features of it, match their needs, and that the relationship between the prices that you're charging them versus the things that you're delivering are kind of reasonable. And so within that, you could have, the kind of gold, silver, and bronze that we often see out there, different price points, doing different things for different people. And that's fine. But I suppose there are some things where we're saying, if you get a request from a consumer to do X, Y, Z, then obviously that's more of an absolute that we want to see you meet. So hopefully there is room for firms to think about this, properly within the context of their consumers and their needs, because that's ultimately what it's about. It's about the consumers getting, good outcomes, firms thinking about that keenly, acting to prevent foreseeable harm, and doing and doing the right thing. So but yeah, so some absolutes but some judgments.
Andrew, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just on this question of benchmarks. Benchmarks never include a fee. In a lot of cases, a benchmark is an index, and indexes do not include fees for servicing them. Therefore, for the consumer, they're always going to look as if they are, or a fund is going to underperform, because they can never match the benchmark.
I mean, just to be clear, I was talking about benchmarking more generally, but happy to take this point here specific to kind of types of investments. So, there are a few things here, aren't there? So in terms of the kind of composition of investment solutions, we want firms to think carefully about it through a number of lenses. It's about what consumers need, the quality of that value assessments is important. As a distributor, you are seeing the various component parts of the solution that you are putting together. And so it's not that there's a singular right outcome for all. It's about, considering the totality of that. Because you're right, you could say, I will just put consumers into a passive solution and then leave it to the customer to manage it themselves. It's very cheap. Is the customer able to manage it themselves? If you're breaking it up into 4 chunks of 25%, they might be. If they're not, then there's probably something else. So I think it's not a race to the bottom on price. It's a clear case of firms thinking about value through the lens of price versus features relative to the consumer need. And there will be different solutions that are right for different groups of consumers, but hopefully firms can avoid the kind of toxic combinations. And look, I've certainly seen some things over the years where you just think, this is just not right, and obviously in the investment space, another key component is the likely upside. So when we talk about price and value, obviously the returns on offer from the investments are important, because they set the kind of the basis upon which kind of the price is as a kind of proportion of those notional returns. So certainly, when in the past we've seen, investment solutions for people in retirement, who are willing to take very low levels of risk, and where total charges have been up, 2.5%, 3%. You think, well, that's 3% out of what, 3, 4, maybe 5% per annum. So that's obviously going to be a significant drag on the end outcome for the customer versus different types of customers where that's not the case. So hopefully firms are thinking about the different dimensions of this and coming to the right conclusions.
I've got a question which I was going to ask you at the beginning, but I will ask you now. And that is that it seems that a lot of what you're talking about here could equally well be applied to trustees in the occupational space. Now, we've just been through a very difficult period for trustees with LDI. If you were to put your consumer duty hat on, and apply the consumer duty principles, the 4 boxes you talked about, to trustees in their decision making with regard to LDI, do you think we'd have had different outcomes to the ones we had in September.
I will put my hand up here that the dizzying world of pension trustees is not my kind of area of expertise. I mean, I know that when we gave the webinar on this, one of my colleagues from our asset management area in cahoots with our pensions policy colleagues talked to this. So what I would do, I'm slightly kind of giving you a handoff here, but I'm giving you a handoff to an answer, which is that we covered this as part of the webinar. It's still on our website. It's my colleague Michael Collins. I think he comes in as third speaker. I will send the link to it. I know.
I will circulate the link.
Yeah. I mean,
as I will
register.
the earlier one.
Yeah, you have to register. But we talk about this. There's mention of IGCs and GAAs. But rather than me doing a really bad job of it, I'm going to kind of ask for one pass on this one.
Yeah, I know. These pooled funds, of course, are FCA regulated products, aren't they? I mean, they although they're in Ireland or whatever. So all these kind of issues come together in that space. And I think that a lot of IFAs and other regulated people are looking very quizzically, at the institutional market and saying, one law for them, one law for us. And I think that that's an open challenge to the FCA, but we really need to feel that we're all in it together on the consumer duty. You know what I mean?
I think so. I mean, obviously what the duty does do is that where there are existing rules in place in a given area and those are felt to meet that aspect of the duty, then firms can continue to do that. So the kind of value assessments in the asset management space, obviously we have some product governance requirements in our prod handbook already. So, in terms of providing continuity, we're saying here, this already applies. If you do this, then you are, seen to be meeting that aspect of the duty, but there may be others. Obviously, the key point being that in some other tangential sectors, they don't have stuff like this. So the duty for them will be, much more substantive because they've not had to adhere to that. So we're definitely not trying to come up with the kind of one rule for one group, one rule for the others. But there is a bit of kind of structural architecture that we've put in to try and create, to the extent that, this is focused towards the retail customer, a kind of a similar and coherent set of standards that, all firms serving these customers adhere to.
Well, thank you very much. I'm sorry to have given you some really curveballs at the end.
No, I don't mind. I've done my best where I thought I could. I will. If you could send on that webinar so people can look at that, because we have talked to it, because we know it's important. And I think the text is also going up for people to wade through the video. And then I will send through myself the links to those pages where if people do spot stuff, whether it's another firm doing something that looks wrong or dodgy financial promotions, we've got pages on our website so that firms can report that easily.
Okay, well, I'll make sure that that's posted to the Pension Playpen website. Brilliant. And it'll be on my blog as well. And I at that moment, I'm afraid we are out of time. Unless there's anybody who's got a really urgent question which they need to ask Michael before we go. Speak now or forever. Okay, in which case I'm going to sort of hand back to Steve Goddard, who's been keeping a low profile on this meeting, but is out there somewhere.
I'm
Steve,
here, Henry. I'm here.
Hello, Steve. Right, do you want to take over?
Yeah. Just to say a big thank you, Michael, for fantastic input there. Henry's clapping. I'm sure everybody's virtually clapping. A big thumbs up from Tom McPhail. Really appreciate your input, and the recording will go on our website later today. So if you are a Pension Playpen member, you'll be able to view that at your leisure. As mentioned last week, save the date on the 22nd, which is 2 weeks today. We have Anne Daniels speaking, who is the first woman to visit the North and South Pole. So that will be very exciting to talk to Anne Daniels. So put that in your diary, 22nd. And she does motivational speaking as well now. So that'll be very exciting. Next week, we're hoping to have Rob Gardner in light of COP27 and sustainable investing. So Henry and I are working on that. And if you're not a member of Playpen, please join. If you are a member of Playpen and you like what you see, then invite friends on the invite friends tab. We really thank Michael again for his time today. Really appreciate that. And as we always say on these occasions, peace in the East. Michael, we've been saying that since February, but we pray for peace in the East. And wish everybody a great week. And thank you for your time and your input. And Henry will send around those links, I think, Henry. Yeah.
I'll circulate the links so long as we have permission from all parties that I do so. Okay.
Thank you.
There we go.
Brilliant.
All right. Cheers, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks very much.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks,
again.
Michael. Cheers. Bye. Cheers, Tom.